All right, so now we've sort of seen where Egypt is geographically along the Nile River. Who were these people? What was Egyptian society like? And again, one reason we actually do know quite a bit about Egyptian society for a couple reasons. One, because it's a desert and things were preserved there over time. So we have a lot of archaeology of Egypt. But the other big thing, and this is sort of similar with Mesopotamia, is they had a system of writing. So the similarity is they both Mesopotamian world had a writing system, and so did Egypt. But their writing systems are completely different. So you can kind of see here in Egyptian writing, they had these hieroglyphs or sacred carvings, and you can kind of see them here. That this is these all these little signs and figures. They have a symbol. I don't really know how to read hieroglyphs, but they have different sounds and represent different forms. But as you can see, it's very elaborate. Like all of this stuff back here, all of this is talking about this scene, who these people are, who these figures are. I mean, this is a scene of offering, probably from a person to a god. Here's the Ankh. We'll talk about all of these things a little bit later as we talk about Egyptian religion. So we know a lot about what Egyptian society. But again, their writing system is very different than cuneiform. Cuneiform was a bunch of wedge-shaped writing. So we can see they both had writing, but here we have a very different form of it. And here you can kind of see a lot of these palaces. I mean, all this stuff. This isn't just decoration. This is history. This is Egyptian history. This is telling who this palace is for, stories of these kings and these rulers. So we know a lot about Egypt through their writing. So some we have, this is preserved, this is inside of tombs. Some is outside of tombs, people can put back together. Egypt also started writing. Egyptians used papyrus or reed paper in the Nile River Delta. These huge floating reed environments existed, and if you take that papyrus and smash it down, or those reeds, you can make paper out of it. So we also have a lot of paper. And here you can see a little bit different writing. There was a different, there's hieroglyphs for sort of sacred carvings. There's also, I believe it's called Demotic, which was more of a everyday, a simplified hieroglyphs. That you could, so if you wanted to just, if you wanted to say, a quick little thing, write some news of what's going on between the kingdom, you would use this. For very more monumental writing, you would have the hieroglyphs. They actually had even these little beetle things. I can't remember the name of them right now. That they would, you could write a little early like text messages. You could write a little thing on and spread them about there. So this is Egyptian writing, and the reason again we know about this is because it was deciphered. And the Rosetta Stone. This is a picture of it here. You might have heard of it. It's very famous. It was discovered in 1801 in Egypt. And it was they were trying to build out a fort, and they dug up this stone. And this stone is actually dated to 196, so actually after the decline of Egyptian civilization, and actually it was part of when Egypt had become part of the Greek Empire. So they were talking about this stone itself is a message about these Greek kings that were living there. But the reason it's important is because it was written in Greek, which we understand, which I think is this top part there. And then it was written in Demotic, which is sort of the simplified language. So they were able to then since they knew the Greek, they could try and pick apart the Demotic, and then they find different, like the word for king, and then you could figure that stuff out, and then work their way in. And I think there was still I think Demotic was still sort of a little bit understood as well. But then from the Greek and Demotic, then they were able to go back and get into hieroglyphs. And then as they started getting more and more, they learned more and more about it, and this sort of opened up the world of Egyptian history, culture, society. So we know quite a bit of it. Egyptian society, from what we know of it, was very hierarchical. There was very strict. The pharaoh. This is another very important sort of part of the Egyptian social world. The pharaoh was very much a king and a god, which again you can contrast with other societies. Not everyone had the king and god connection, but in Egyptian world, the pharaoh was a direct descendant of the gods. So they were head of both the political and the religious worlds. So you can kind of see this is Tutankhamun's mask here. This is Ramses II, I think. You can kind of see these very deified figures. So the pharaoh and the royal family were the top of the social hierarchy. Below them were the administrators and scribes. So you can hear, I mean, you see a lot of things in Egypt of people practicing writing. So the administrators, people who kind of kept things, the worlds going, the royal families, bureaucracy, laws, all of those things that were part of civilizations, complex civilizations, record keeping, all of those things. They're very highly trained figures. And then below them, you have sort of the artisans, the merchants, craftsmen, farmers, soldiers. The work here is a little picture of, your everyday people. This is processions to giving offerings to the pharaohs. You can see some products here. I'm not sure exactly what these are. Something grown, some animals, right? Cows, other things, finished goods here, breads that you would bring. So all these things were produced. And then similar to other societies, there were servants and slaves as well. That were kind of the lower part of these worlds. So that is, there's the sort of social pyramid of Egypt, which, we saw social hierarchies in Mesopotamia as well. But here, the big difference here is this pharaoh figure of God and politics, God and government being the same groups. Then one thing that's also very interesting about Egypt that we can compare to other cultures is a lot of people look at it as very homogenous. The Egyptian world, they all share the same language. They all have the same religion, same gods. Here's Ra. We'll talk about different gods there. They had urban and rural. I mean, there's a lot of cities. This is a reconstruction of the pyramids of Cairo. And here, I don't know if you know, but the pyramids were once white, so they glistened in the sun, and they had a golden top. They weren't just, today we just have the relics of them. So we have urban and rural worlds. And one big thing is we don't get a lot of city walls in Egypt, which suggests to us is what archaeologists do. I mean, it suggests without walls there probably wasn't a lot of war internally within Egypt. That these cities, different cities had different functions, head of politics, head of temples, producing different products. But there's not like this, at least from what we see, there's not like a huge internal rivalry between cities. It's not like Babylon and Nineveh or the different cities of Sumer that are fighting for each other. So it kind of gives us this idea of this homogenous culture, that they were all that Egypt was sort of working all together, and they shared their language, shared their societies, their social makeups, their religions. Which again is a little different than Mesopotamia that had different languages, Assyrian, Sumerian, Babylonian, different writing systems, different ruling families, different cities rivaling for power. And cultures are insulated. A lot of Egypt is somewhat insulated. I mean, as we look geographically, it is cut off, surrounded by desert, but it's obviously not isolated. There was connection with outside groups, but it took a lot if you wanted to invade Egypt, or if Egypt wanted to invade these other groups, which did happen. And we'll look as we look at Egyptian history and kingdoms, but definitely kind of this sort of insular worlds as well. So here you have the gods, the cities. I mean, mummification, as we look at religion, was very much part of Egyptian culture, and we'll talk about how that is. Here's a nice one. This is cats. It's believed that cats were maybe first domesticated in Egypt, though it's arguable if cats were actually domesticated or maybe they domesticated us, right? That they kind of felt it was easier to work with humans than not. And cats are very useful, right? They keep away rodents. But then they also said like the cat's meow is sort of was developed. The cats developed that to mimic human babies, so that we pay attention to them. So the whole domestication of cats is a whole other world, but they're very popular. We have pictures of cats. We have mummifications of cats. So they're very much part of this Egyptian world as well.